Hello, Loren. Welcome to the
Hi,
webcast.
Wim. Glad to be here.
Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Sure.
What I want to do first is just do a little bit of an introduction for the people who've been living under a rock for the last couple of decades, so that they haven't heard of you yet. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but going over your career a little bit, so you started as a military police officer during the Vietnam War. If I believe correctly, was you were stationed mainly in Saigon.
Mhm.
Then you had a full career as a law enforcement officer in Portland. I think it was for about 30 years, something like that. And then there's 11 black belts in different styles like karate, jiu-jitsu, Arnis. And then there's the publishing, which is mainly well over 50 books now, primarily on self-defense and martial arts and related subjects, but also of late several fiction works, which include full novels and short stories. Did I cover everything?
Yeah, it's 3 years in the military police and 25 with Portland. And then while I was waiting to get hired, I worked security at a department store for about a year, where every other week I got beat up by old ladies with purses who were trying to steal things. And um, so then I did the police work. So altogether, it was 30 years in law enforcement, but 25
Yep.
as a city cop.
Okay. All right. Um, Well, I have some cues for you that I want to go over first because this is kind of stuff that people most often ask when we talk about you or talk about anything relating to self-defense and so on. Can you give me a little bit of an idea what your training looks like now? So, what is there a method to it, or are you just freewheeling now, just doing what you feel like, or what's your training look like now?
Well, as of last month, and this is July of 2016, I went over, celebrated my 51st year in the martial arts. That's 5-1. And that's a lot of Excedrin and a lot of casts and bandages and things. Well, my training has changed quite a bit, but now, as it has for the last 30 years of those 51, is my primary emphasis is always on street survival, street-oriented martial arts. So throughout the week, I train 6 days a week. Sunday, I usually don't train unless I'm kind of restless. I'll do some stretching or some light shadow boxing. But I start every day with a walk, and then in the evenings, 2 nights a week, I teach classes, but primarily private classes. And then on Fridays, I do a very long and hard solo workout. And on those alternate days, I lift weights, and each body part gets a day. I have it set up so I work, for example, arms specifically on one day, and 3 days later I work another body part, but it indirectly gets the arm. So each body
Yeah,
part is getting, it's like each body part is getting 1.5 workouts, if you will. So
yeah.
I'm not trying to put on muscle mass. I don't care about that. I'm just trying to keep power and speed in my martial arts.
Okay. Is there a specific reason why you do it that way, like the 1.5 workout? Or is it just something you prefer
Uh,
personally?
yeah, I only have so much energy, and to do more, I don't think I would gain anymore.
Yeah,
When I work out, what's today? Today's Thursday. Today's my shoulder day, so I work really hard on my shoulders, not only for muscle but for um, the rotary cuff, uh,
yeah,
the injuries and the potential injuries that will be coming, and the past injuries that I've already had, that sort of thing. And then the shoulders get an indirect workout when I do other weight training on other days. So I have it set up that way. And I find that I haven't lost anything. I used to be a bodybuilder way back in the 70s, even entered they call the fig leafers, on the stage. And I'm kind of
yeah.
embarrassed by that now, but I haven't lost too much size, but, and I don't care about that anymore. I had that, years ago. Um, Nobody's attracted to a 70-year-old muscular guy. So I do it. I
I
do
don't know.
it.
It's not my thing, but
Well,
who knows? The
they
world's a
are
big
they
place.
are attracted. Okay. Trust me on it. But mostly I do it. I do it for health because you want that
Yeah,
weight bearing exercise on your body to keep those bones strong, and also to keep the martial art techniques. I'm not doing it for like concentration curls or working flies to bring out this striation. I don't care about any of that.
yeah,
I do specific weight exercises that pretty much follow the track of basic martial art movements.
yeah. And would that be like regular, let's call it strength training, or are you more now into what they call functional training, where it's more complex motor skills involved, or do you stick to like bicep curls, tricep extensions, stuff like that?
Well, part of it is functional, and the big part that's functional is where my head is when I do it. For
Yeah,
example, if I'm doing a curl, sometimes what I'll do is I'll lay on the top, I'll lay on the floor at the top of a set of stairs, let the dumbbell hang down 2 or 3 steps, then I'll curl it up. And I'm working the bicep, but I'm also thinking I'm pulling a guy into me. Or if I'm
yeah, yeah,
doing
yeah,
some kind of pressing exercise, I'm working the punching muscles, but I'm also thinking I'm thinking punch on each technique, but I'm also working the chest and the triceps and the shoulders. So um, some of the exercises are basic, some are specific for the martial arts, but some are just basic curls and tricep exercises.
yeah,
But my thinking process on each repetition is what I'm doing if I was in a self-defense situation.
yeah. I think that's one of the things that has come through many other books that you've written, when you talk about the mindset, and the latest 2 books you wrote on meditation for warriors. And I think it's in one of the solo training books you also have a big piece on on focusing mindset and having the right intent when you train. Have you always trained weights like that,
No,
or is okay?
no. Well,
Is
bodybuilding, is all about bringing out looking good in the shirt, and all that kind
Yeah,
of stuff. Yes. When I was really doing it heavy, I had taken a short break from regular like karate training. I was just teaching
yeah,
police self-defense classes. But when I was doing it really heavy for about 3 years, preparing for a bodybuilding Northwest National bodybuilding contest, then it was all about bringing out the striations and the hardcore.
yeah,
I got to tell you, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done preparing for that physique contest 3 or 4 months
yeah,
out. It was absolute torture. No carbs, just protein, and of
yeah.
course you're just constantly inundated with advertisements for juicy hamburgers and cakes and pies. And I've never felt so rotten in my life. It wasn't until the day after that contest I went back to eating normal. I started feeling good again. So whatever that means. So
No, I don't know. Have you seen the new Tarzan movie?
just
The guy who's in it, he's
sure,
pretty built, and
sure.
there was this interview with him. I think it was on one of those late night shows, and he said, you were in awesome shape. How what happened? What did you do? Guy said, I trained for 9 months, and I was only allowed to eat like chicken and broccoli, or
Right.
said it was boring as hell. I hated it, but that's what you do. You just work out like crazy, and then eventually you end up with a ripped, muscular body like
Right.
that.
And you got to peak.
Um,
You got to peak on that
yeah,
day of the contest, or in his case, peak on the shoot. You know, uh,
yeah.
so it's really really hard, and it was harder than some of the martial art training I've had. So
And when you said that, you obviously like you didn't train with intent during those days. Was it soon after you stopped bodybuilding that you lifted weights more with that intent, or is it something that came much later?
well, I was training really hard in martial arts, and I was competing, and I was kind of the defending champion in some of the local West Coast tournaments. And I blew a shoulder in a fight downtown when I was making an arrest. And
Yeah,
and then later I blew a knee doing a spinning hook kick. Never do a spinning hook kick on a freshly painted floor because your body turns and your foot stays there. Your body does
yep,
a 180 or 360 or whatever it is, and your foot stays pointing forward. The kneecap broke off and rotated around the back part of my leg. So I couldn't train for a while, and I was kind of getting a little tired of the competition. What's the point? That kind of thing. So I
yeah,
focused on bodybuilding really hard for about 3 years. And as soon as the bodybuilding was over, I realized how that was kind of embarrassing getting up there, the fake tan on and shaving all the hair on your body and stuff. And so then I went back. Right about then, Arnis was really catching on. This was about 1980. And Professor Remy Pressos was in town all the time. He had a couple of his students were here. So I got back into the martial arts via Arnis, and then via jiu-jitsu, and then back to karate training again about a year later, and haven't stopped
yeah.
since. Oh.
And if I mean, so when you first came from the karate training, and then you got into the Arnis, what was that like for you as an experience? If you come from a very different martial art, because depending on what style you practice, obviously, but if you look at karate styles, and compare them to Arnis or any other Filipino style, the fluidity, the way the way it's taught, the emphasis on weapons and so on. I can imagine that it must have been a little bit awkward at first, this totally different style, or were you comfortable right off the get-go?
Yeah, I think Remy Presas, the key guy of modern Arnis, excuse me, he made it easy because
Okay.
I'd go to seminars with him, and some of the students were Tai Chi students, some Kung Fu students, some were karate, some were whatever, boxing, and how they did Arnis reflected their art in how they did
Yeah.
Arnis. So in my case, I studied with one of Ernesto Presas, that's Remy Presas' brother.
Well,
They weren't
yeah.
getting along at the time, but so I studied one of his students for a while, got a brown belt with him. And he was a very rigid, like a Shotokan kind of style with his
Yeah.
harness. Remy was, it is okay, you can do it that way. You can do it that, it is no problem. You know, you can do it that, whatever style.
Yeah.
What was really cool with the Kung Fu guys looked really cool doing the harness. So whatever your style was, the harness adapted to that. So he made that transition pretty easy, I think. So.
Yeah. And how do you still train Arnis a lot, or a little bit less, or how's that now?
He gave me a black belt in 88, 89, I think it was. And
Yeah.
after that, we kind of slowed down a little bit. And what I try to do is we have the kick punch arts in what I teach: karate, Muay Thai,
Yeah.
some boxing, Kung Fu, that sort of thing. Then we have the grappling arts, which is, in my case, is primarily Aikido-Jitsu, which I work with my teacher to modify for the street. Aikido Jiu-Jitsu is a fairly traditional style, but I told him I teach cops and I'm out on the street all the time. I wanted the stuff to work on the street, so he okayed me to do that. And so then about that time I got into the Arnis also. And then once I got the black belt in Arnis, then I kind of slowed down a little bit with the Arnis and just adapted it to what we're doing. So we have techniques that work within the punching range, the kicking range, the distant stick fighting range, and of course up close and personal, the grappling range. So that's what I try to do. So I try to take these arts that I've done and put them into this system that works in all three ranges, or four ranges, I guess it is.
Great. Another question, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but if you compare how you trained when you first started with martial arts to how you train now, what would be the main differences? Or how did that evolution go? Or basically, how is it now different from way back then when you started, year one, and now 51 years later?
Year one. Year one. Yeah, well, martial arts changes all the time. As you know, martial arts looks a little bit different than it did 5 years ago, than 10 years ago, 50 years ago. And I started in 1965, so martial arts look quite a bit different. I started in a system called Kong Sudo, which is a Korean Japanese style.
Yeah.
Who knew? But it was, even though it was a Korean style, we didn't do a lot of kicks. It was mostly hand techniques. We did Japanese forms, the pinyin forms.
Yeah.
We did a lot of sitting in horse stance and punch, 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 and thousands of punches, thousands of blocks in horse stance and in forward stance and that sort of stuff. Pretty rigid. When I went into the service, I trained a little bit for 2 years here and there when I was in the States. When I went to Vietnam, I worked a very busy area. Saigon at that time was considered the most dangerous city in the world. And I got in fights with 12, 14-hour shifts. It wasn't uncommon, depending on where you're working, to get in 5 or 6 brawls a shift.
Yeah.
And I got tired of it. I got tired of having wrenched fingers and puffed lip and torn clothes and all that stuff. But what I found at that time was my traditional martial arts weren't working for me too well. I had a good punch. I had a very powerful. You sit and do 1,000 punches, 4 times a week.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a good punch, but other things just didn't work very well. When I first got out of the service, I kind of criticized traditional martial arts, but then a few years later, as I saw a broader spectrum of the martial arts and became exposed to more people, I realized the problem wasn't traditional arts. Traditional arts work. It didn't work for me. I wasn't making them work. I've seen some amazing traditional martial artists out there that I would take into the darkest, dankest alley with me. But it wasn't working for me. But before I realized that, then I started, when I first got back, my style had changed to a tournament style, which I didn't care for too much. But then I slowly started evolving into this, trying to get things more street oriented. Because by then I was on the police department. Techniques had to work on the street. They had, if they didn't work, we tossed them.
Yeah.
The police department's kind of like the military. If something doesn't work, it goes. As simple as
Yeah.
that. So that kind of got me more street oriented. So that what I was teaching in the police department, I kind of shifted that into my karate jiu-jitsu Arnis training to make that as street oriented as possible. And it paid off. I had a lot of cop students, and they'd come back and tell me, "Hey, that really worked great. You know, they saved my bacon last night." That kind of thing. So that was a real nice reward
Yeah.
for that, all the effort it took to make that transition.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I always like to ask those kind of questions because a couple of years ago there was this interview with Dan Inosanto, and he talks about the evolution of martial arts, and you touched on that a little bit, like when you said that it's always changing. And somebody asked him, why are there so many defenses against the sidekick in Jeet Kune Do? And his reply was that back in the day, that was all people threw. People would do sidekicks all day long, and apparently Bruce Lee then considered, okay, we need to have a good defense against that technique. And that brings me to something else. In one of the styles that I practice, there's a technique against this bizarre technique which I've never seen in a real fight, which is like a double palm strike, one high, one low.
Sure.
And there's a specific technique to defend against that, which apparently back in the day in China was common. I've never ever seen it anywhere in the world in a fight ever. Apparently, that was a big thing. And then when you look now, I think UFC 1 was like 25, 26 years ago, maybe 30, I don't remember. And now you see guys basically having mixed martial arts as what they consider fighting to be, or have a little bit of training in that, and that is showing up more and more in street fights. So it's always this interesting evolution to me in how when you start training, what is considered this is the way people fight now, and then how it evolves. And in particular, people like you who are, in law enforcement, in the thick of things, and you get to encounter, like you say, five fights in one shift. You get exposed to all kinds of good and bad crap, what works and what works not. So that's that's the reason why I asked, and which I think is also interesting.
Just a little side note on your double palm.
Yeah.
The Japanese they call it a Upunch, because you're kind of shaped like a U, and I put it in a book here not too long ago. We were playing around with it in class, and it's very powerful on a bag. I mean, it looks stupid.
Yeah.
We're just screwing around with it. And I said, I've never used it. I've never used it in the street. I don't really, like you, I don't know anybody who has, but I just put it in. I said, play with this and see what you think. Because if you could get it in, it's a little tricky to get in. The guy'd have to be, some guy teetering, getting ready to pass out, and you could bop in. But it's just kind of a fun technique. You can't rule out any technique.
Oh no, not at all. Because the really funny thing is that the counter that we have to that technique is actually the Upunch. So that's the funny part, is that they attack with a double palm, we counter with the Upunch.
He's kissing off your arms, probably.
It's kind of like a deflection sideways that turns to that Upunch. You can make it work in a much simpler way as well, and turn it into something more practical in the sense of street self-defense, to adapt it to the attacks that you actually see nowadays, which are more common. But the Upunch is tricky, but if you can make it work, it hurts. The guy's going to be.
I don't know if I should grab here or here, So.
That kind of brings me to the next question. I mean, if we covered, how martial arts changes all the time, what training advice would you give to somebody who's just now starting in the martial arts, somebody young, in their teens or early 20s, and they kind of get the virus of martial arts? What would be the advice you'd give them?
Well, there's so much martial arts out there now in the world, on TV and movies and stuff. People come in some really preconceived ideas. They did way back years ago too, but even more so now. I would just say, stick it out for 6 months. As you know, so many people quit within a month. They're not Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan or whatever. It hurts a little bit. You've seen people who the first time they get tagged a little bit, they go, "What? I didn't know I was going to get hit." Ride that out for 6 months. If it's still not your thing, I have 2 daughters. My older daughter did it. I made her do it for 4 months, and it just wasn't for her. In fact, it was hurting our relationship. My youngest daughter did it for 18 years.
Yeah.
So there you go. She tried it. She gave it her best. It just wasn't for her. So give it a few months before you quit. It just may. I quit. I failed my first test. I got mad. I was 19 years old and I quit. My instructor called me a couple of months later and says, "Where are you? You got a lot of potential. Come back." That stroked my ego. I came back, and it's been 50 years since later.
Yeah.
Give it a chance. As you know, it's a wonderful life. Martial arts isn't just for fighting in the streets. It's for all kinds of things, psychological, spiritual. It keeps you in shape. It's always there. You're walking around with this gym in your head.
Yeah.
And when the rest of your life is falling apart, you got your martial arts. When the divorces and deaths and you get fired, all that stuff, you still have your martial arts and it's still there. And the side benefit is you can defend yourself, if you get into trouble. So just stick with it and know that it's easy to learn. Right now, students, when I get a brand new student, they learn more the first night, and this is absolute truth, they learn more the first night than I learned the first year.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Yeah.
But they're not any good at it. But then we spend the next year polishing that and showing all the variations of applying that. I show them 9 techniques. There's an infinite number of ways you can apply those 9 techniques. I learned 9 techniques the first year.
Yeah.
I do them the first night. That's the Arnis. That's a Filipino way of teaching. And I found it really, I've been doing that for 30 some years, and I found it works really well. It gives a student a lot of stuff. He gets really enthused, and he tends to stick with it longer than someone who just sit and horse and do punches,
I switched to that kind of training for my mixed martial arts class, where I developed a bunch of basic striking drills. And the first drill is 9 techniques with 2 blocks in them, and it covers all the basic jab, cross, hook, uppercut, overhand, all the basic punches they need to know. And first class, that's what they do.
Sure.
It's all class long, just one technique, and do it a couple of minutes and add the second, and build it up in layers. And everybody, all my students, even students that have been training with me for over 10, 15 years, they said their punching improved tremendously once we switched to that kind of training.
Yeah.
So it works.
Sure.
It definitely works.
And the interest stays high too.
Yeah, true. Let me flip the previous question and ask it differently. What training advice would you give to martial artists who are in their 40s and 50s, maybe who've been in the game for a long time now, but they're not young men anymore. They're not 18 anymore.
If you're in your 40s and 50s, you need these. Okay, so this is a shameless plug, but I did a book. I'm kind of known for the solo training books. And this is Solo Training 3 that came out about a year ago, and it's for martial artists 50 and older. It's done very well, and I get a lot of emails and reviews from people who say, "I'm not 50, I'm not even close, but it's really helped me to learn how to not get injured." There's a lot of things in here about preventing injury or working around injuries you acquired earlier. I got a nice letter from a medical doctor the other day, and he says everything is really sound, and he says I advise it to my patients, even if they're not martial artists, because there's a lot of stuff about weight training and freehand exercise, that sort of thing. So as far as martial arts go, the last half of the book is all techniques that work really well for older people. Simple stuff, specific target selection, that works for them, even though they may not be as strong as they were when they were 20 years old. They may not be as fast as they were. So things like that. I start out by just talking about understanding aging. So many guys come in, they're 40 or 50, and they try to compete against the 20-year-olds. Not going to happen. So realize you're not 20. Know the difference between I want to do that and I shouldn't do that. If I use an example, if the teacher makes a big pile of bags and somebody on the other side is holding a board, you're supposed to jump over the bags and kick the board. If you're 40 or 50, run around the bags and kick the board. The other guys may laugh at you, but you're not going to blow your ankle or your knee when you get all that weight on your joint, that 40 or 50-year-old joint, and you're going to continue training. You're not going to be out of the game. So, just tell your teacher, get a teacher that understands that there's certain things you don't want to do just because you don't want to get injured and you want to stay in the game and you want to keep paying him his dues. He'll listen then. So the things about proper diet, it's all about the middle path. Don't go crazy with the fats, don't go crazy with the carbs, all that stuff. Eat good, because you're fueling this aging body. And this works for the younger guys too. You're fueling this aging body. You're working out hard. You're putting a lot of demands on this body. So fuel it with good food. You don't put crappy gas in a BMW. You're the BMW. Fuel it properly. Consistency is the big thing. Training, if you train on, your work allows you to only train on Saturdays, that's a little risky. 2 times a week, 3 times a week is better. Those weekend warriors, there's a big line at the at ER with people, with the weekend warriors. Work the core, work your flexibility. Both those things will help you stay injury-free, help your strength. Speed training, resistance training, not only for that to strengthen your bones, but lifting as heavy weights safely will help your speed. The fast twitch muscle fibers respond to heavy weights. You see guys say, well, I grab a 10-pound dumbbell and I do 500 back fists. Ain't gonna help your speed. It might help your endurance. It might help your your endurance and a little bit some of the muscles that pull the weight down, but you're going to be much better off using a weight that, I don't know if you agree with this, I know you're a personal trainer, but everything I've read and everything I've found personally and with students is lift heavy to stimulate. You're not going for bulk. You're not trying to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. You're going to make a strong muscle. A strong muscle has better fast twitch muscle fibers that helps your speed. You can't increase you cannot increase your fast twitch muscle fibers. That's hard to say right after you brush your teeth, but you can improve them. Unless you're a natural like Bruce Lee, you probably had 98% fast twitch muscle fibers. So there's lots of stuff like that. The rest of it's all on fighting, different devices you can use to improve your fighting as an older person, target selection, working on different kinds of postures and that sort of thing. So there's no reason you can't keep. Dan Ionesano, I just read something a couple of days ago. He's going to be 80. Very quickly.
I think he is in his 80s now.
Yeah. Maybe it's an old clip I saw, but I think he just started MMA about 2-3 years ago. So I don't know if he's still doing it.
Awesome.
Is he still doing it? That's the question. Or is it just that one class?
I have no idea. Well, that's a great answer. And for the people watching this, I'll put a link to where they can get the book, Solo Training Tree, where they can buy it in the episode guide, both on YouTube and on my blog. So then the people don't have to search for it. Which brings me to the next question. What are you writing right now? What are you working on?
Well, you said I did over 50 books. I've did 53 books, about 30 of them on the martial arts. The rest are on different things. I'm real interested in subculture. So I have books on street gangs and prostitution, what it was like working Skid Row as a policeman. We have a couple books on post-traumatic stress, that sort of thing, meditation. And then I got into the fiction writing. I've written 5 novels. They're all called Dukkha. Dukkha. It's about a cop who's a martial artist, and he beats up a lot of martial artists, and things don't always go well. 4 of those books are out. The 5th one is still sitting at the publishers. And then recently I've been doing some short stories. The current one I'm working on, I think the current 3 I'm working on is called Old Ed. There's Old Ed 1, Old Ed 2, and Old Ed 3. Old Ed 3 will be out shortly. Old Ed is a 76-year-old guy who lives in a retirement home. I kind of copied that home and him a little bit after my dad. Because my dad was a very handsome guy, and he was one of 8 guys that lived in this retirement home with 300 women, and he was very popular. And plus he had a car, so that's Old Ed. But what people don't know is that he's a hitman. And he's done 74 kills for the last 30-some years. And he doesn't believe in firearms. He uses a unique set of weapons. He's not a martial artist, but he uses some martial art weapons that he's become skilled with over the years. And so that's what I'm working on right now. I'm getting ready to. I wrote a book that came out a few months ago called Cops: True Stories of the Paranormal. I've always been interested in the paranormal. It's done really well, and so I'm going to do some fiction short stories based on true events that happened in that book. And I like horror. My wife and I watch a lot of horror movies and read horror books, and I wanted to try my hand at writing that kind of style. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's pretty cool. And for the people watching this, I read the first 2 All Dead stories, and they're awesome. I enjoyed them tremendously. So it's one of my it's a favorite character of mine. And also just the idea. I mean, well, you know, hitmen who don't get caught or don't die, they eventually have to retire. So something happens with them, and then we get to find out. This is pretty cool. You kind of answered a little bit. You know, the next question I had on my list is, you know, what you're writing next. So it'll be some more fiction then.
I'm always looking for a good nonfiction. I'd love to do a biography on someone. I had something in the mill for a while to do a book on a guy, an adventurous guy. Had a long life of adventures, including helping the Dalai Lama escape out of Tibet back in '59, I think it was. That deal fell through. I'd love to do another paranormal book. I enjoyed doing that. It was a little tough getting cops to come forward, and I got about 18 cops, I think, tell their story, more than one story. But I was kind of running out of cops toward the end of the book, so some of the guys came forward and said, "I have a fantastic story, but I'm still having trouble dealing with it in my head. I just don't want to tell it yet." So, but I'd love to do something on the paranormal that's a little unique, something that's a little bit different. But about martial arts, I thought about doing some amendments to, not amendments, but some additional ebooks that go along with the solo training over 50. Some other things come to mind that I discovered since out, and just small, ebooks, 30 pages. That sort of thing. Let's see what happens.
All right.
And it's at this point that suddenly the audio got lost, so we didn't manage to record that part anymore. Loren graciously agreed to try again, so a few days later we did the second part of the interview, and I will put that online in a few days. In the meantime, check out the episode guide that I posted on YouTube and on my blog with all the links to the things that Loren mentioned. And for more information, you can go to my blog, wimsblog.com, or my site, wimdemeere.com. If you like the interview, please subscribe also to the YouTube channel, and then you automatically get updates when another episode comes online. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.